Good evening, and thanks for tuning in to the NoCo Sports Show. I'm Grace Reader, joined alongside our weekly panelists. We've got Eddie, Brian, Nick, and Tyler with us here tonight. We unfortunately have some people who are either sick or have a ton of homework. We know that these guys can really get talking, so we're going to go ahead and get started. This weekend, a video surfaced of Miami Dolphins O-line coach Chris Forrester snorting what appears to have been a line of cocaine. Monday morning, Forrester officially announced his resignation after accepting responsibility for his actions. Forrester also happens to be a CSU alum, former player, and a previous assistant coach here at CSU. Let's talk the NFL's handling of this. What do you guys think about the NFL giving him the decision to resign versus just firing him?
Yeah, first of all, I think that's ridiculous. We were talking about this earlier, and I think ultimately the decision is that he has to leave the Miami Dolphins coaching staff. But I think them allowing him to resign rather than firing him doesn't bring across the point the NFL needs to bring across. I mean, obviously they're exemplifying a lot for the youth. Them allowing him to resign kind of downgrades the seriousness of abusing cocaine, abusing an illegal drug in public or just in general. So I really think he did need to be fired.
Yeah. Like you said, Eddie, the important part is that he doesn't have a job anymore. I think what they have to reflect, though, is how they handle both the players and the coaches, different people for teams in the same light. Players who test positive for banned substances get a suspension or get handling in a different way, and they can appeal something like that. I think the NFL allowed him to resign because it kind of clears him from that handling of the situation. He can't go back to an appellate court and say, hey, all these players who I work with test positive for cocaine or marijuana, which is a banned substance all the time, and they just get a suspension. I think the NFL kind of saved themselves from that, playing it safe. I do agree that he should have been fired, and that's the more appropriate course of action. They're just looking out for their own skin.
I completely agree with you. The important point to me is he doesn't have a job, be it fired or resigned. Obviously, fired is what you'd want, but I'd rather him resign now than have weeks of deliberation and bringing it to light and keeping it going, like you said, Brian. So I think just he doesn't have a job. That's all that matters to me.
So.
Do you guys think that he's going to have any future in football just because of this incident, or is his career kind of...
I don't think he should have a future in football, but I think based off of his track record, he will. I mean, he's been a coach for 4 college teams, 8 NFL teams. His coaching career dates back to the 1980s, and kind of like you said, with players also having an opportunity after they do drugs, take Josh Gordon. I mean, he's been caught doing drugs a ton of times, and then he's had another opportunity. He has been re-signed and, given another chance after that. I think he probably will. I don't think he should be given another chance. He wasn't doing a great job in Miami, but the bottom line is if the NFL doesn't take him out of the league or force him out of the league, eventually someone's going to need offensive line help, but plenty of teams do right now.
I disagree, really.
Sorry, we keep talking about the players, but don't you think that coaches should be held to a higher standard than the players should?
I mean, obviously, but it happened, so he's not on the team anymore, and I don't think he's going to get another job. So it's a press nightmare to sign a guy who was just resigned because of cocaine abuse. Let alone he wasn't great. The Dolphins' offensive line isn't anything to get excited about. If it was maybe the Broncos' defensive line coach, that's a different story. He's a great coach, and probably does need to be somewhere, regardless of unless it's something terrible he did. There's no reason to take a gamble on someone who's mediocre at best.
I disagree with you, though. I think watching that video that was terrible. I don't think you really, the language that he used in that video, the way that he portrayed his team, and the way that, and it's drugs. So I just feel like that was not a not serious situation.
He also mentioned sexual experiences with a woman, which is extremely unprofessional. And like you said, coaches should be held to a higher standard. I'm going to disagree, but I'm going to kind of agree because I think players and coaches both should not, drug use should not be tolerated. I think both of them should not be given a second chance. Going back to what I said earlier about how they set, the NFL sets examples for a youth. If you're going to give people a second chance, whether it's a player or a coach, people are going to see this, our youth is going to see this, and like I said earlier, it downgrades the seriousness of abusing drugs. I mean, the NFL has a chance to set positive examples for children, and that really doesn't help them out.
I agree with you on that.
I think a positive example, too, would also be giving him a chance, but not a quick chance. He's going to have to go to rehab. He's going to have to be out of football for at least a year or two.
And publicize that.
Publicize that. He's going to have to start very low, probably at a D2 university, as, again, another assistant coach, nothing too fancy. He's not going to have a big-time job. He's not going to get paid a lot of money. He's going to have to work himself up. A guy who reminds me a lot of this situation, doesn't involve drugs, but Jim Bob Cooter, he has a pretty questionable police history, questionable at best.
Police,
and he right now is the offensive coordinator for the Lions and is considered one of the best offensive coordinators in football right now. On one hand, what Jim Bob Cooter did is, not anything positive. It's something that nobody aspires to do or be. But at the same time, he went through that process. He built his career back up, and he's proved again that he's worthy of being in football and that he is a better person. And so I think that there's a really solid blueprint there for Mr. Forrester to follow and for the NFL and for football in general to push him on.
Well, and you can use this as a way to positively publicize what he's doing through his recovery process. And I think they made that very clear at the beginning that they were going to support his recovery process, but also, on the other hand, then you're also publicizing the event itself.
It really is a bad look for the NFL all around, so let's just hope that they can spin this and make it a positive thing moving forward so that incidents like this don't come up again and examples like that. So let's move into CSU football. This weekend, Utah State took on CSU, and our producer, Tim McCall, got the opportunity to travel down to the Maverick Stadium and watch the Rams play. CSU won 27-4, so what do you guys think are some of the keys to their success, and what do you think that they need to work on?
They didn't turn the ball over against a team that, there's the blocked punt. But that was something that we talked about a lot coming into it, Utah State being a team that really has a advantage with turnovers, and Nick Stevens was smart with the football. He didn't throw interceptions, which is what he has to do since he's not a supreme physical talent. He's a mental talent. And he was superb in that facet. And the running backs didn't lose the ball. They don't usually, but they were able to hang on to it and didn't give any unnecessary mistakes.
I think we had 41 carries for 205 yards, so it was a hell of a day out for the Rams on the ground.
And you mentioned the offensive end. I think when you talk about CSU's success overall this season, you have to first look at the offensive end. Specifically going to the offensive line, they've actually allowed the 4th fewest sacks in the NCAA so far. They haven't allowed a sack in 5 out of 6 games. That's ridiculous. The offense has been getting off to a lot of fast starts. In their 2 Mountain West games, they've outscored their opponents 31-0 in the first quarter, outgained them yardage-wise by over 300 in the first quarter. They're converting on third down, something they had trouble with last year. They've converted on 54.1% of their third downs. That's 3rd best in the FBS, best in the Mountain West. I mean, their offense is firing on all cylinders, and that's where you have to give the most credit to.
I think another big piece to point out, we knew the offense was going to be good. We knew we were going to see success, and of course it's awesome to see them grow in those ways. Especially, I like third downs a lot. It shows that the offense is capable of staying on the field. But I really like how the defense played. A tackle for loss on over 20% of Utah State plays. 13 tackle for losses on just over 60 plays. That's an incredible number. 7 sacks forced. This is a defense that is starting to turn into a unit on this team that's capable of winning a game by itself and contributing in a game more than what the offense needs. When we look at a game like CU about a month ago, this was a game where the offense struggled and really needed the defense to pick them up. And now while the defense did that for the majority of the football game, the defense never did anything to get the offense back into it. This is a defense that's turning into that kind of a unit. 13 tackles for losses is a big deal. No turnovers, which I would have liked to see. We had 5 turnovers against Oregon State, which is definitely a point of emphasis that I think we should continue to look for and expect from our defense. They're capable of it, we know that, but this defense is really starting to play well. And when you look at the Mountain West slate that we have coming up, it's really easy for a team to get ahead of themselves, to start playing, expecting next week to be a sure thing, to be a lock. Having both sides of the football play well means that you can have an off week on offense. Nick Stevens can, not throw the ball as much, or we can hedge back on the running game and allow the defense to take over a game more so. The 31-0 in the first quarter, and I like to call it 38-0 because we scored on the first play of the second quarter against Hawaii. That is awesome numbers. But you can't expect that for 8 football games in a row. You have to rely on something else. And 7 offensive points scored by Utah State, 21, but all of them in garbage time by Hawaii. Those are really, really positive points.
And I'm not saying you can expect them to keep shutting out their opponents in the first quarter, but I think the ability to get off to a hot start gets everyone's confidence up. It's a big thing, and it definitely has helped them so far.
It's fun to watch, too.
Oh, it's fun to watch. And you focused on the defense. Specifically, their red zone defense has been great, too. They've only allowed opponents in the red zone 8 times. Scoring-wise, their red zone totals are 7th best in the FBS. I mean, not allowing opponents in the red zone is going to force teams to more field goals in general or just possessions where they don't score. So the defense has really shined in the most important part of the field, which is the red zone.
So now there's 2 conference plays under CSU's belt, 6 more. Who are you looking for? Who's going to be the toughest opponents coming forward for the Rams, and who do you think is just going to be a sweep?
Boise State, for me, is the only real competition you can even consider coming up. New Mexico on the road is a little bit tough, but Boise State obviously is always a great competition. They have better scouting and recruitment and whatnot, but they're not looking great this year either. With a quarterback controversy between Cozart and Rippon, there's a lot of issues for them that are distracting them from playing the Rams. That's a game they're not really as worried about as they should be, especially playing San Diego State this year.
I mean, we're halfway through the season, and this Mountain West Conference is wide open right now. I mean, the Rams we're 2-0, but there's a couple teams that are 1-1. So, I mean, Wyoming's right there, Boise's right there. So I think we can definitely make a push here and finish out the season with 8, 9, maybe 10 wins if the Rams really play well on the road.
I expect 10 wins, actually. When you look at how each of the teams going forward have played this year, they've all underwhelmed.
Yeah.
New Mexico is the only team left on the slate that hasn't played worse than we expected them to play so far. Really, honestly, you look at Air Force, they just lost to Navy, and not well either. The loss of Jalen Robinette, probably the best receiver they've ever had there, has really closed up the triple option. You can cheat on them really, really hard. I expect our trio of safeties, Schlager, Fogel, Hicks, to cheat all day long on that triple option and make a lot of tackles, especially right near the line of scrimmage. I expect with Wyoming, who has shown without a doubt that Josh Allen is the only top-tier player on that team, they're lacking in a lot of positions, especially other offensive weapons that are going to help him thrive. The receiver position, the running back position, even the O-line, which was really solid last year, has looked a little shaky. They've become less of a threat, especially considering that's a rivalry game. They beat us last year. We've got a lot of blood on our teeth that we want revenge. All these teams are slowly starting to look worse and worse. Even Nevada coming up, they're a team that they're 1-5. They lost to Idaho State. They didn't look good against Toledo. They got destroyed by Washington State, who's a top 10 team, but they did not hold their own. And while they run the ball all right, we've shown with Hawaii and with a lot of other football teams that you're going to need more than just being able to run the football to beat us. And Boise State really is the only team right now. And like you said, Nick, they've got a lot of questions in their offense. Yeah, but they don't have a clear number 1 running back.
They don't have a rush attack right now.
Yeah.
Unless it's Cozart.
They had 17 rushing yards against a Virginia team.
How has no one mentioned San Diego State, though? You mentioned most teams aren't really level with their opponents. I know, but you were talking about every team in the conference hasn't really done anything that we play. Yeah. Well, if we do go to the Mountain West Championship, we're going to have to play San Diego State.
That's a different thing. Right. They're very good. I do like that we beat them last year and handled them well. But yeah, no, if we make it to the Mountain West Championship game, that's a whole new conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, Boise State and Wyoming have both been very disappointing so far. But I mean, maybe I'm skipping to the San Diego State game in my mind because that's honestly what I've circled on my schedule. If they get to the Mountain West Championship, that's going to be who they have to play. And honestly, I know they're a ranked team, but I do think CSU can beat them. So in my mind,
we showed we can do it last year.
Right, and I'm rooting for CSU.
New Mexico and Wyoming late in the schedule.
Yeah, and honestly, what you have to really think about is you have to be rooting for San Diego State to be undefeated up until that game because CSU goes up on a big stage in the Mountain West Championship and beats a ranked team. That's going to help their resume. I'm not going to say it's going to get them into a Power 5 bowl, but it's going to get them into a better bowl game.
That's that's what I expect right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Playing a Power 5 team right now, come the end of the season, come December or maybe even January. That's what I have circled for this football team. Right. We beat San Diego State healthily last year on the road. This is a team that returned a lot of guys as well. We have the blueprint. We know how to do it. And they actually lost their best player last year. You're looking at a football team. Yeah, Daniel Pumphrey. You're looking at a team that doesn't exactly have more weapons than they had last year, and a CSU team that doesn't lose anything pivotal. There's very little reason why we would see a different
we've got to
result.
be the favorite coming up. I mean, we've got more dimensions than these other teams. It seems like we're really starting to pick up and fire on all
Do you think they would be
cylinders.
favored against San Diego State, or you just mean in their half of the Mountain West?
Well,
I'm just clarifying.
Yeah.
But I definitely give CSU a chance going in against Mountain West or San Diego State.
You mentioned the defense has been strong. I do think they have to be a little stronger. Look, points per game, they haven't allowed so much. They've been better than they have been last year, but they have allowed a lot of yardage, specifically passing yardage. They have the 115th best total in the FBS, which is out of 130 teams, meaning that's bad. They've stopped teams in the red zone, but if you're going to continue to allow teams to move the ball, it will catch up to you. Against a team like San Diego State in the Mountain West Championship with a talented running back in Rashad Penny, that's specifically when it could catch up to you. So I do think they need to force some more 3-and-outs, not allow teams to move the ball.
I do want to put up a big asterisk for that receiving yards against number.
Yeah.
A lot of those are going to come in garbage time, have come in garbage time.
But that's the case for every team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you look at a lot of other football teams that play a full 3 quarters, when we look at Hawaii, when we look at Utah State, those games were decided at halftime.
Yeah,
and they were throwing the ball the entire second half. The other teams were. And that's going to give them a lot of yards. I look more at the number of 3-and-outs, the number of big plays, the number of times, the red zone efficiency there.
Absolutely.
You know, teams are moving the ball well to get a drive moving, but very rarely are they getting past the 50. Very rarely are they getting to the red zone, and very rarely are they having a full 75-yard, even 60-yard drive that accumulates points for them at the end of it. Because this defense is a bend, don't break defense, and we'll bend a little bit at the beginning, but we haven't broken so far this year.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I'm going to cut you guys off because we have a lot to talk about. We're going to take a quick break, but don't go away because up next we're going to talk a little Mike Pence, we're going to talk a little Cam, so don't go anywhere.
They said I couldn't dream. Called me a piece of trash and swore that's all I'd ever be. Said a bottle couldn't see the ocean. Give up. Go back to the dumpster. But I didn't listen. I made my way. And now, I am what I've always wanted to be.
Vice President Mike Pence walked out of a football game on Sunday between the 49ers and the Colts. Around a dozen 49ers took a knee during the national anthem. Both the Vice President and the President took to Twitter to comment on the incident. To add to that situation, Jerry Jones then made a statement that the Cowboys will not play if they disrespect the flag. However, during the Cowboys' September 25th meeting with the Arizona Cardinals, Jones and several members of his family joined the Cowboys in taking a knee and locking arms prior to the anthem. Let's also mention here that Jones is one of the 7 NFL owners who donated to Trump's inaugural committee, and that after that Cardinals game, ESPN reported that Jones had a meeting with Donald Trump. Does this seem like it was a fair statement for him to make to you guys?
You mean Jerry Jones making that statement in general?
Yes.
Absolutely not. I mean, you mentioned how he kneeled before with the players against the Cardinals. He's completely contradicting himself. The first thing I'm thinking is I'm wondering why he kneeled in the first place. If he was such a wide-open Trump supporter, it doesn't really add up. But you mentioned they had a meeting after that game. I mean, we can only imagine what happened in that meeting.
I'm sure we can imagine exactly what happened in that meeting.
Right, exactly. So he told Jones not to do it again, and that's probably leading to the statement right now. So I would say since he blatantly contradicted himself, there's no way this is a fair statement.
I also feel like with Jerry Jones, he's just really a publicity guy. He's one of the only owners that stands in the locker rooms after games to do interviews, and he only does it because he loves press attention.
Right.
So I think this, all the way around, this just feels like a press stunt to an issue that shouldn't be a press stunt.
But that's also why it matters to Trump. That's why he immediately had a meeting with him, because Jerry Jones does have such a vital role with the press. And you know Trump's all about that, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
It also strikes me as a very idle threat.
Yeah.
Jerry Jones is a football guy first and foremost. Yeah, he made a lot of money, but he prides himself as being the Cowboys owner first and foremost, and I'm sure he'd give up most of the rest of his life to continue being the Cowboys owner. And if, as an owner, you forfeit a football game, that sounds like a pretty short tenure for me.
I'd like to even watch him bench Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah,
one player. I don't think it's going to happen.
There's no way. He's not going to sacrifice the chance to win a football game, especially in a year like this year, where you have a very talented Cowboys football team capable of winning a lot of football games, capable of making it to the playoffs and making a run. It's not realistic. You know, I heard a quote one time, "Gentlemen don't make idle threats." Jerry Jones is not portraying himself as a gentleman right now. He's being flip-floppy, he's being washy.
The Cowboys also aren't off to the best start, so I don't think Jones is going to bench players at a crucial time in the season. You know, it just doesn't make sense.
I think the only players he should be benching are the ones who aren't playing well. And I mean, you find me a Cowboys fan who likes Jerry Jones and thinks that all of his decisions are good decisions, and I'll find you a liar. You know, he does this kind of thing, and I'm sure Cowboys fans expect it, and then probably just wrote it off as this Jerry Jones being Jerry Jones. You know, it's just on a more topical issue than usual.
Right. So, well, then, speaking of press stunts, does this feel like it was a press stunt from Mike Pence?
130%. Yeah. I know Pence is from Indiana, but out of all games to go to, why would he go when they play the 49ers, who have had the most players kneel whenever? There's no way he wasn't expecting that.
Why did anybody go to the 49ers Colts?
In all fairness,
I turned it off because it seemed like a JV high school game.
Manning, that's why.
It's better than the Jets-Browns game.
In all fairness, it was probably one of the only games the Colts can expect to win until Andrew Luck comes back, which who knows when that will be.
Well, it feels like I feel like if you're going into that 49ers game with the knowledge that since the beginning of the 2016 season, they have had at least one player kneel or sit during the national anthem for every game. How can you not expect that to happen? Well,
it's like I hinted at earlier, when Trump and Jones had that meeting, they probably said, we're going to have Pence go to the game against the 49ers because that's the best chance we have at having a lot of players kneel so he can leave. It's just going to increase their odds on making that statement they wanted to make about players
being the vice president, everything he does is a press stunt, really. You know, so again, just on a topical issue, it's getting more attention than usual. If you follow him around with a camera, I'm sure 20 of his 24 hours every day are something that makes someone frown.
Well, someone just so happened to snap a nice Insta pic of him standing, holding his hand over his heart for the national anthem.
I'm sure
that was not
planned.
There was no planning involved in that whatsoever.
He also posted a picture on social media of him at the game, but it was actually a game from 3 years prior, and he wasn't wearing the same things. Nobody around him was the same, which, I mean, that feels fishy. And knowing how this White House has operated in Donald Trump's tenure, there's been a lot of weird media hiccups like that. It's just a staple of someone touching it and moving pieces around that doesn't quite seem right.
Well, Cam Newton had something to say to the press this weekend as he apologized to Charlottesville Observer via social media video, but this weekend in his post-game presser, he commented saying, "My sarcasm trying to give someone kind of a compliment turned in ways I would have never imagined." So, do you guys think Cam Newton's apology was sincere, or what steps should the NFL take?
As a Panther fan, I think that my opinion should be probably the most clear. I hate Cam Newton, always have, I watch every Panthers game, and there is at least 5 occasions every game where I'm like, Cam, why? And I wonder why he's a superstar, because he does a lot of really stupid things. I think it's just Cam being Cam, just doing things before he thinks. And again, for the 3rd straight time, it just happened to be on a very topical issue again, and it's getting a lot of media heat, like it should.
Well, we can't just write it out either. We can't just write it off because Cam Newton has frequently said things that are maybe not the most intelligent. Like, it is an issue that even if Cam Newton was just too stupid to figure out what he was saying, I feel like it's still something that can be discussed. You have a pro athlete who obviously is in the spotlight all the time, and when he says something like that, we can't just say, oh, Cam Newton,
he needs to be more mature, but I think he is immature, and you said he does what he thinks. Maybe a better way of describing that is he acts on his impulses too much, or he can't control them.
He does it in his play, too.
Right, and now he doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't know how to apologize. You mentioned the statement he said in the post-game presser. For one, how could he think this is a compliment, bashing the knowledge of a female reporter? And for two, I mean, how could he not imagine that this would blow up on him in this day and age?
He was stunned, quote unquote.
How is he stunned, you know?
No.
It makes no sense.
The most interesting thing I took from the whole situation was in that initial apology video that he posted himself, not through any Carolina Panthers outlet or not through any approved source, it was just him on a video. He said he started to realize how bad it was when he heard from his sponsors.
Yeah.
And that's not a direct quote, there was a little bit more to it. But that made me really think he doesn't understand or care about the social impact of this. He cares about winning football games, he cares about making money. And it made me realize, I think we take a lot more socially and ideologically from professional athletes than we should. We put too much into their thought process. We don't let politicians or businessmen tell us about sports.
Exactly.
You know, Donald Trump doesn't come on TV and give us his predictions for every football game.
Twitter.
Twitter. We had Barack Obama who did his bracket picks every year, and that was just a fun thing to see.
And that's not usual either.
But this isn't talking about sports. This is talking about very touchy.
It's the other way around.
I'm saying the
other way around.
I know, but like we would, as a businessman, we don't say like, oh well, sports people don't talk about business, so they shouldn't talk about social issues either. With business people, we would never say that. We would still say that was a sexist comment.
I think what he's trying to say is we put too much into what athletes say because they aren't the people that we would want to hear their opinions on. Like, I mean, they're not the people who are supposed to have the perfect opinions about gender discrimination and things like that. They're
there for sports and nothing more.
They're there for sports, meaning you can't trust what they say about things unrelated to sports. They should be held accountable, but I think that's just what he's trying to say.
And I graduated from college.
Exactly.
Based on what we've seen from universities like North Carolina and whatnot, we can expect that his college education for what he had probably wasn't the same as the majority of people who go to college.
This just feels like a bit of a pass for him. Like when we were talking about players kneeling, we didn't say, oh well, players shouldn't make political statements. This is what, it's the same thing. He's making a political statement.
I don't think his play should be affected for something he said. I mean, that goes back to, I mean, obviously he shouldn't have said it, but
no, I think he should absolutely be reprimanded.
He has.
I think he should be.
He
go
can
back
say
to
whatever
the
he wants.
Forrester
Sure, he can
situation.
get fined, but I don't think he should lose game time or anything like
He
that.
lost sponsorship dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
He was immediately
And that's
removed
right.
from his stand-in commercials. I don't know how much that was worth, but that definitely hurts.
That was his biggest ad.
No matter the way you want to do it, I think he needs to be reprimanded. And like I was just saying to Grace on the side, you got to go back to the Forrester situation. The NFL should have fired him because they have to make a point. They have to make an example. It's the same thing. There's no role for gender discrimination in sports, meaning you have to give Cam Newton some type of consequence. Whether he did act on a dumb impulse or not, you have to do something about it.
Right.
You know?
No, I completely agree.
I think that's the biggest piece of this is we haven't really heard from the NFL so far. They haven't said anything publicly about it and exactly stated their opinion on everything. I would have liked to see them do some sort of fine or reprimand. Of course, like Nick said, I don't think you can take away game time for that. It's an opinion statement. He didn't harm anybody physically necessarily, like we see with like the Danny Trevathan hit last week where he was suspended for 1 game.
That's game time.
I would argue differently, though. I think he did a lot of harm.
Not physically.
Not physically, but that doesn't mean that you didn't do harm. She didn't go to work this week.
But you can't take away game time for that.
I would take away
I
game time. A
disagree with
fine
you.
doesn't mean anything to him.
No.
You have to take something from him that matters.
Yeah, which is game time. And something that makes a statement. Fining him isn't going to show anyone anything. But when he's not on the field, that makes a statement. And I think that we have just flown under the radar with this issue. Even Cam Newton said, I'm done talking about this. It's in the past. Let's talk about football. And it's not fair.
Cam Newton's dropping thousands of dollars on his post-game interview outfits. Like a fine doesn't mean anything. I think it's disappointing to Panthers fans to give him a game time repercussion, but I think, like we were saying, you have to give him a type of repercussion that matters to him, and that is game time over money.
Absolutely.
I think what you guys say, the game issue brings us into college football. We see a lot of 1 quarter, 1/2 suspensions in college football. We might be into the era of that in the NFL now.
Absolutely. All right, well, that's all the time that we have tonight, Rams, but make sure to tune in next week. Hopefully we will have the lovely Rachel and Tim back. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it. We will see you then.